Welcome back to my channel Sleep Beneath History, my friend. Before we begin tonight's peaceful journey, if you enjoy these relaxing history stories, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment and subscribe. It truly helps the channel grow and allows us to continue exploring the quiet corners of history together. Now make yourself comfortable. Settle into your favorite chair, or perhaps rest your head upon a soft pillow. Take a slow breath in, and let it drift gently back out again. There is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else you need to do. Tonight, we're traveling to a wide and quiet land. A place where the sky seems almost endless. Where golden grass waves gently beneath the warm wind. Where red earth stretches beyond the horizon. And where one of history's most unusual events quietly unfolded. It has become known as the Great Emu War. Despite its dramatic name, it was not truly a war. There were no grand battles, no castles, no marching armies facing one another across a field. Instead, it was a curious meeting between people trying to protect their farms and thousands of large birds, simply following the ancient paths their ancestors had walked for countless generations. It is a story that has become famous for its strange humor. But tonight, we will not rush toward the laughter. Instead, we will take our time. We will discover the people who lived there. We will understand the land they depended upon. We will walk beside the soldiers who became farmers. And we will quietly meet the remarkable birds that unknowingly became part of one of Australia's most unforgettable stories. So close your eyes if you wish. Imagine warm sunlight touching your face. Imagine soft winds carrying the scent of dry grass. Somewhere in the distance, a lone bird calls across the open plain. The world feels peaceful. The earth feels endless. And our gentle walk through history begins. Chapter 1. Australia after the Great War. Imagine you are standing in Australia during the early 1920s. The First World War has finally ended. For many years, young Australians had traveled across oceans to fight in lands far from home. Some had marched through muddy fields in Europe. Others had fought beneath blazing desert suns. Many never returned. Those who did return carried memories that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The guns had become silent. The battles were over. But life after war was not always easy. Many former soldiers wished for something simple. They wanted peace. They wanted steady work. They wanted families. They wanted quiet mornings instead of noisy battlefields. The Australian government shared this dream. Leaders believed that giving land to returning soldiers would help them build new lives. It seemed like a good idea. Instead of remembering war every day, these men could become farmers. They could grow wheat, raise sheep, build homes, and create peaceful communities across the countryside. Many people believed farming would provide a fresh beginning. Programs were created to divide large areas of land into smaller farms. Thousands of former soldiers received pieces of land. Some had never worked on farms before. Others had only limited experience. Still, they accepted the challenge. They hoped hard work would reward them. Imagine one of these young veterans. Perhaps he is only 30 years old. He has already seen more hardship than many people experience in a lifetime. Now he climbs down from a train, carrying little more than a few bags and great hope. Ahead lies his new farm. It is wide, quiet, beautiful, but also difficult. The land is unfamiliar. The climate can be harsh. Water is not always easy to find. Yet he smiles, because this place offers something the battlefield never could. A future. Australia itself was changing. Cities such as Sydney and Melbourne continued to grow. New roads appeared. Railways reached farther into the countryside. Small country towns slowly expanded. Stores sold farming tools. Blacksmiths repaired wagons. Schools welcomed children. Church bells rang on Sundays. Life settled into peaceful routines. Across the countryside, mornings often began before sunrise. Farmers rose while the stars still filled the sky. The air felt cool. Birdsong slowly welcomed the day. Tea boiled over simple stoves. Breakfast was filling but plain. Fresh bread, butter, perhaps porridge, maybe eggs gathered only moments earlier. After eating, work began. There were fences to repair, animals to feed, fields to prepare, machinery to clean, water tanks to check. Days were long, sometimes very long. The Australian sun could become fierce by afternoon. Its warmth pressed down upon hats and shoulders. Dust floated gently through the air. Sweat covered tired faces. Yet work continued. The wheat farms became especially important. Australia's dry climate suited wheat better than many other crops. Golden fields slowly spread across large parts of Western Australia. Each season followed its own quiet rhythm. The ground was prepared. Seeds were planted. Rain was hoped for. Weeks passed. Green shoots appeared. Months later, golden waves of wheat stretched across the landscape. When the wind blew, the fields looked almost like oceans. Gentle waves rolled endlessly beneath the bright blue sky. It was beautiful. Harvest time brought both excitement and worry. Machines moved carefully through the fields. Workers gathered grain that would eventually travel across ocean to distant countries. Every successful harvest meant another year of survival. Every failed harvest meant difficult times ahead. Life depended upon weather. Rain could arrive too late, or not at all. Too much wind could damage crops. Unexpected frost could harm young plants. Farmers learned patience. Nature followed its own schedule. No one could hurry it. The government encouraged more settlement. New farming communities appeared. Simple wooden houses stood alone upon great stretches of land. Neighbors sometimes lived many miles apart. Visits required long journeys by horse or truck. Mail arrived only every few days. Supplies had to be carefully planned. There was no quick trip to a nearby supermarket. Everything required preparation. Imagine living there. Morning silence stretches for miles. The only sounds are birds, perhaps distant sheep, the gentle creaking of windmills lifting precious water from beneath the earth. Clouds drift slowly across the sky. The pace of life is calm, steady, patient. Evenings bring another kind of beauty. As the sun begins to sink, the entire landscape changes color. Golden light turns orange, then deep red. Long shadows stretch across the fields. The air becomes cooler once again. Families gather inside their homes. Simple meals are shared. Stories are told around kitchen tables. Children laugh softly. Older people remember different times. Sometimes someone plays a piano. Sometimes a violin. Sometimes everyone simply enjoys the peaceful silence. Outside, countless stars slowly appear. Australia's night sky can feel endless. Without bright city lights, the stars shine brilliantly. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a soft river of light. People often pause to admire it. For a few quiet moments, worries seem much smaller beneath such an enormous sky. Returning soldiers appreciated these peaceful evenings. After years surrounded by noise, many treasured silence. They planted gardens beside their homes. Fruit trees slowly grew. Children were born. Dogs chased sheep across paddocks. Cats rested upon sunny windowsills. Life slowly healed. Yet farming remained difficult. Many veterans received land that was not easy to cultivate. Some farms lacked enough water. Others contained rocky ground. Heavy equipment cost money. Seeds cost money. Fences cost money. Almost everything required money. Unfortunately, money was often in short supply. Governments had hoped these farms would quickly become successful. Reality proved more complicated. The world economy changed after the war. Prices for wheat did not always remain high. Sometimes farmers worked incredibly hard only to earn very little. A single poor harvest could create serious problems. Many families borrowed money. They believed next year would surely be better. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was not. Still, hope remained. Hope is a remarkable thing. It encourages people to wake before dawn. It convinces them to plant another field, repair another fence, try once more. Across Western Australia, thousands of determined families continued working the land. Every season brought fresh possibilities. Every sunrise offered another chance. The countryside itself seemed alive. Wildflowers appeared after welcome rains. Colorful parrots flashed across the sky. Kangaroos bounded gracefully through open spaces. Small lizards warmed themselves upon sunlit rocks. Countless insects buzzed among grasses and flowers. Nature surrounded every farm. Most of the time, people accepted this as simply part of life. Wild animals belonged to Australia just as much as people did. Sometimes birds ate small amounts of grain. Sometimes kangaroos crossed fences. Occasionally rabbits caused trouble. Farmers repaired the damage and continued working. Nature and farming existed side by side. Usually, no one yet imagined that another visitor would soon arrive. A visitor taller than many people, unable to fly, curious, vast, and traveling not alone, but in astonishing numbers. Far beyond the distant hills, beyond the dry scrublands and ancient bush, thousands of emus quietly followed paths that had existed long before farms, fences, roads, or wheat fields. They knew nothing about governments, nothing about property lines, nothing about harvests. They simply followed the rhythms of the Australian landscape, just as they always had. As the night grows quieter and the stars shine over the peaceful wheat fields, let us leave the hardworking farmers resting in their homes. In our next chapter, we will gently meet these remarkable birds and discover why so many of them began a journey that would unexpectedly place them at the center of one of history's strangest and most unforgettable stories. As the night grows a little deeper, let us continue our quiet journey. The farmers have finished their evening meals. The lamps inside their homes glow softly through the windows. A cool breeze drifts across the wheat fields. The stars shine brightly above the wide Australian sky. Far beyond the farms, in places where few people live, another world quietly awakens. This is the world of the emu. Imagine standing on a gentle rise, overlooking the Australian bush. There are no roads, no fences, no telephone poles, no houses, only open country stretching farther than the eye can see. The land is painted with warm shades of gold, brown, green, and red. Low shrubs cover the earth. Tall eucalyptus trees stand here and there, their pale trunks glowing softly in the moonlight. The air carries the fresh scent of leaves and dry grass. A gentle wind whispers through the branches. Everything feels calm. Everything feels timeless. Then in the distance, you notice movement. At first, it seems like shadows drifting across the land. Slowly, they become clearer. Tall birds walk quietly across the plain. Not one, not two, but many. Their long legs carry them smoothly over the uneven ground. Their heads rise above the grasses. Their feathers move gently in the breeze. These are emus. For countless thousands of years, emus have lived across Australia. Long before ships arrived from Europe. Long before farms covered the plains. Long before roads crossed the countryside. The emus already knew every river, every watering hole, every open grassland, every safe path through the bush. They belonged to this land in a way few creatures ever could. Imagine how many generations of emus had walked these same routes. A young bird follows its parents. Years later, it follows the same journey with chicks of its own. Generation after generation. Century after century. Their knowledge was never written in books. It was carried quietly through instinct and experience. Their lives followed the seasons. Rain would fall somewhere across the enormous continent. Fresh grass would begin to grow. Seeds would appear. Tiny insects would become plentiful. The emus simply traveled toward places where food and water could be found. They did not stay in one place forever. Australia itself encouraged movement. Some years brought generous rain. Other years brought long dry spells. The birds adapted. They became travelers. Patient travelers. They walked great distances without hurry. If food became scarce, they continued walking. If a waterhole dried up, they searched for another. There was no panic. Only steady movement across the ancient landscape. An adult emu could grow surprisingly tall. Many reached nearly 6 feet in height. Standing beside one would feel quite remarkable. Its long neck stretches upward. Its powerful legs seem almost graceful. Its large eyes quietly watch the world around it. Unlike many birds, the emu cannot fly. Its wings are very small. They rest close against its body beneath its soft feathers. Instead of flying into the sky, the emu became an excellent runner. Its legs are incredibly strong. When danger appears, an emu can run faster than many people would imagine. Across open ground, it moves with smooth, effortless strides. Its long legs carry it over rocks, bushes, and uneven earth with surprising ease. Watching an emu run is almost peaceful. There is no frantic flapping, no noisy struggle, only long, steady steps that seem perfectly suited to Australia's wide open spaces. During quiet mornings, emus often feed together. They peck gently at seeds. They nibble tender shoots. They eat grasses, flowers, fruits, and small insects. Sometimes they swallow tiny stones. These stones help grind food inside their stomachs. Nature often finds clever solutions. Even something as ordinary as a small pebble becomes useful. Emus are curious birds. If they notice something unfamiliar, they often stop to look. A shiny object, a strange sound, an unusual shape. Rather than running immediately, they sometimes stretch out their long necks to investigate. This curiosity would one day play a small part in the unusual events that history remembers. Yet at this moment, the birds know nothing of future stories. They simply live their quiet lives. Many other animals share the bush with them. Bright parrots chatter in the trees. Cockatoos fly overhead in noisy groups. Kangaroos graze nearby. Small wallabies disappear into thick shrubs. Wombats rest inside cool burrows. Lizards bask on warm rocks beneath the afternoon sun. Australia is filled with unique creatures. Each has found its own place within this remarkable landscape. The emu is among the largest, but it is rarely aggressive. Most of the time, it prefers to avoid trouble. If left alone, it continues walking peacefully. Perhaps that is one reason so many people today find emus fascinating. They seem calm, patient, quietly confident. Their soft brown feathers help them blend into the landscape. From a distance, they almost disappear among dry grasses and bushes. Only when they begin walking do they become easy to notice. The changing seasons shaped every part of their lives. During cooler months, pairs formed. The females laid large dark green eggs. These eggs were beautiful. Their deep color almost resembled polished stone. Then something rather unusual happened. Unlike many other birds, the male emu became the devoted parent. Once the eggs were laid, he settled carefully onto the nest. For many weeks, he rarely left. He protected the eggs with extraordinary patience. Imagine sitting quietly in one place for nearly 2 months. Day after day, night after night, the father emu did exactly that. He ate very little. He drank very little. His entire attention remained focused on the eggs beneath him. Rain might fall. Cold winds might blow. The hot Australian sun might shine overhead. Still he remained, waiting, protecting, watching. Eventually, soft tapping sounds came from inside the eggs. Tiny cracks appeared. One by one, the chicks emerged into the world. They looked very different from their parents. Their small bodies were covered with soft feathers marked by light and dark stripes. These stripes acted as natural camouflage. Among tall grasses, they became surprisingly difficult to see. The father gently led them away from the nest. Now he watched over them with remarkable care. The little family moved slowly through the countryside. The chicks copied everything their father did. When he stopped, they stopped. When he walked, they hurried after him. When danger approached, they gathered close beside him. It was a quiet picture of family life. Simple, peaceful, patient. Many travelers who visited Australia admired this unusual sight. They expected fierce wilderness. Instead, they often found gentle scenes like these. A father carefully guiding his young across open plains beneath an endless blue sky. Nature is full of quiet surprises. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia had known the emu for thousands of years. Their stories, traditions, and knowledge stretched back across an astonishing span of time. The emu appeared in ancient stories, passed from one generation to another. It was respected as an important part of the natural world. People understood its habits. They knew when it traveled, where it found water, when it nested. This knowledge came from careful observation over many lifetimes. For countless generations, people and emus shared the same landscape. Neither sought to conquer the other. Instead, both adapted to the rhythms of the Australian environment. Everything changed slowly after European settlement expanded. More farms appeared. More fences stretched across the land. Roads divided ancient pathways. Water tanks stood where natural watering holes had once been enough. Fields of wheat spread across places that had once held only native grasses. To farmers, these fields represented hope. Months of labor, financial survival, food for distant markets. But to the emus, they looked like something much simpler. A vast field filled with delicious plants. The birds did not understand ownership. They did not recognize fences as human boundaries. They saw food, fresh water, open space, exactly the things they had always searched for. Imagine an emu approaching a newly planted wheat field for the first time. The young green shoots stretch across the landscape. Tender, easy to eat. The bird lowers its head. It pecks once, then again. Soon several more emus join. None of them realize they are eating crops that a family has spent months preparing. They simply follow instinct. One bird becomes 10. 10 become 50. 50 become hundreds. The fields are enormous. So are the flocks. Each bird eats only a little. Yet together they consume much more. Even more importantly, their large feet trample young plants as they walk. The damage grows quietly, almost unnoticed at first. Farmers begin seeing footprints, broken stalks, missing patches of wheat. At first they believe only a few birds are responsible. Perhaps tomorrow they will leave. Perhaps they are simply passing through. Often they do move on. But sometimes more birds arrive. Then even more. Each flock follows another. The migration has begun. Far beyond the horizon, thousands of emus are making the same seasonal journey they have followed for countless generations. They are not marching toward battle. They are not invading. They are simply walking the old paths of their ancestors. Yet those ancient paths now cross a new world of fences, farms, and golden wheat. Neither the birds nor the farmers yet realize that these peaceful encounters will soon become one of the strangest chapters in Australian history. As the stars continue their slow journey across the quiet night sky, let us leave the emus gently wandering through the moonlit grasslands. In our next chapter, we will walk beside the returning soldiers as they struggle to build successful farms, and we will see how hope, hard work, drought, and thousands of hungry birds slowly came together to create the remarkable events that would one day be remembered as the Great Emu War. As the quiet night continues, let us leave the ancient pathways of the emus for a little while. The stars still shine above the Australian countryside. A gentle breeze moves through the eucalyptus trees. Somewhere far away, an owl calls softly into the darkness. The world feels calm. The world feels still. Now let us return to the small farms that are scattered across the wide landscapes of Western Australia. Imagine the first light of dawn. The eastern sky slowly changes from deep blue to soft pink. A thin layer of mist rests close to the ground. The air is cool, carrying the fresh scent of damp earth after a light shower. Smoke begins to rise from the chimney of a small farmhouse. Inside, a family is already awake. The kettle gently whistles over a wood-burning stove. Bread is sliced onto simple plates. A pot of porridge warms quietly. The day is about to begin. The man sitting at the table once wore a military uniform. Years earlier, he crossed oceans to fight in a war that changed the world. Now his uniform has been folded away. Instead of heavy boots covered in mud from distant battlefields, he wears worn leather boots dusted with the red soil of Australia. Instead of carrying a rifle every day, he carries farming tools. Life has changed, or at least he hopes it has. After the First World War, many governments searched for ways to reward the men who had served. Australia believed that giving returning soldiers farmland would offer them both work and dignity. It sounded like a wonderful idea, a peaceful reward after years of hardship. The government divided large areas of land into smaller farms. Thousands of veterans accepted the offer. Some dreamed of becoming successful wheat growers. Others imagined peaceful lives raising sheep or cattle. Many had never owned land before. To them, receiving a farm felt like receiving a second chance. Imagine how exciting that first day must have been. Standing upon your own land, looking across hundreds of open acres. The possibilities seemed endless. There would be fields of golden wheat, Healthy animals. Fruit trees growing beside the house. Children running across green paddocks. A comfortable home built with hard work and patience. It was a beautiful dream. But dreams often require great effort. Many of these farms were located far from established towns. The land had not been carefully prepared. Some areas were covered with thick scrub. Others were filled with tree roots and stubborn rocks. There were few buildings. Sometimes there was only empty land waiting to be transformed. The work began immediately. Trees needed clearing. Bushes needed cutting. Roots had to be removed. Stones were gathered by hand. Fences stretched mile after mile across the countryside. Every fence post had to be dug into the hard earth. Every strand of wire had to be pulled tight. It was exhausting work. Yet each completed section brought quiet satisfaction. Little by little, empty land became a farm. Many families built simple homes. They were not grand houses. Often they were made of timber with corrugated iron roofs. The walls were plain. The furniture was simple. But they offered shelter. They offered warmth. Most importantly, they offered hope. Inside these homes, life settled into gentle routines. The mornings always arrived early. Long before sunrise, someone lit the stove. Tea was prepared. Breakfast was eaten quietly. The day's work was already waiting outside. There was never a shortage of tasks. Some days were spent repairing machinery. Other days were devoted to planting. Sometimes fences were damaged by storms. Sometimes animals wandered away. Sometimes water pumps stopped working. Every problem demanded patience. The former soldiers discovered that farming required a different kind of courage. The battlefield tested a person's bravery in moments. The farm tested patience every single day. Nature moved slowly. Seeds could not be hurried. Rain could not be commanded. The seasons followed their own rhythm. A farmer learned to wait. Many veterans found comfort in this slower life. The silence felt healing. Birdsong replaced the sound of artillery. The rustling wind replaced explosions. Wide open skis replaced narrow trenches. Although farming brought new challenges, it also offered peace that many had longed for. Neighbors helped one another whenever they could. If a family needed help raising a barn, nearby farmers arrived with tools and wagons. If someone's horse became injured, another neighbor might lend an animal for a few weeks. Communities grew stronger through cooperation. No one could easily survive alone. Imagine visiting one of these small farming communities. The roads are little more than dusty tracks. Children wave as they pass on horseback. Dogs bark happily from front yards. A blacksmith hammers glowing iron inside a small workshop. A general store sells flour, sugar, tea, soap, and farming supplies. People greet one another by name. Everyone understands that life in the countryside depends upon friendship as much as hard work. On weekends, families sometimes gathered together. Perhaps there was a church service in the morning. Afterward, neighbors shared meals beneath the shade of large trees. Children played simple games. Adults exchanged news about crops and weather. Someone might bring a violin. Another person might sing an old song remembered from childhood. For a little while, worries seemed lighter. Yet beneath these peaceful moments, many farmers carried quiet concerns. Money was becoming difficult. Starting a farm required expensive equipment. A plow, a wagon, horses, seeds, water tanks, fencing wire. Everything cost money. Many farmers borrowed what they needed, believing future harvests would repay the debt. Sometimes they succeeded. Sometimes they struggled. The price of wheat did not always remain steady. One year it brought a fair return. The next year it might fall sharply. A farmer could work from sunrise until sunset for months and still earn very little. Imagine how discouraging that must have felt. After clearing land, planting crops, repairing equipment, watching the skis each day, the harvest finally arrives. The wheat is loaded onto wagons. It travels by rail toward distant ports. Then news comes back. Prices have fallen. Months of hard work bring only a small reward. Still, the farmers refuse to give up. Tomorrow is another day. Another season will come. Perhaps next year will be better. Hope remains their most faithful companion. Weather also brought endless uncertainty. Australia is a land of remarkable beauty, but it can also be unpredictable. One year generous rains filled rivers and ponds. The next year drought left the earth cracked and dry. Without enough rain, young wheat struggled to grow. Dust storms sometimes swept across the plains. The wind carried fine red soil high into the air. The sun disappeared behind curtains of dust. Everything became quiet and strangely orange. When the storm finally passed, fences, machinery, and homes were covered with a thin layer of earth. Then there were the insects. Locusts occasionally arrived in enormous swarms. Grasshoppers chewed through young plants. Rabbits multiplied quickly, eating crops and damaging fields. Every season seemed to introduce a new challenge. Yet the farmers adapted. They repaired, rebuilt, replanted. They learned that farming was never about controlling nature. It was about living alongside it. The land itself possessed a quiet personality. During spring, tiny wildflowers appeared across the countryside. Purple, yellow, white, blue. Even places that seemed dry and empty suddenly burst with gentle color. Bees buzzed softly among the blossoms. Butterflies drifted lazily through the warm air. Life returned with surprising beauty. Summer brought long, bright days. The sun climbed high overhead. Heat shimmered above the fields. Grass became pale gold. The scent of eucalyptus leaves filled the warm breeze. By evening, families often sat outside after supper, enjoying the cooler air. They watched the sky slowly fill with stars. Sometimes children searched for shooting stars. Sometimes grandparents pointed toward familiar constellations and shared old stories. These simple moments became treasured memories. Autumn was perhaps the busiest season of all. The wheat ripened into a sea of gold. Harvest machines moved steadily across the fields. Grain poured into waiting wagons. Dust floated gently behind every machine. The work was tiring, but it also brought satisfaction. Months of effort were finally becoming visible. Every full wagon represented another step toward security. Every successful harvest offered fresh hope. Yet there was one growing concern that farmers discussed more frequently each passing year. Wildlife. Australia had always been filled with remarkable animals. Most caused only small inconveniences. A kangaroo might jump through a fence. A flock of parrots might steal a little grain. A rabbit might nibble young plants. These were accepted as part of country life. But recently, people had begun noticing something different. The number of emus seemed larger than before. At first, only a handful appeared near the fields. Then dozens. Then hundreds. The birds usually stayed only briefly before moving onward. No one thought much about it. After all, emus had always wandered across the Australian landscape. They belonged there. Farmers respected that. Still, quiet conversations began during community gatherings. I saw nearly 50 emus yesterday. They crossed my north paddock. They walked straight through the fence. They ate quite a bit of the young wheat. Others nodded thoughtfully. They had noticed the same thing. No one imagined how much larger the flocks would soon become. The birds were following ancient migration routes. But the landscape had changed. Where native grasses once stretched for miles, there were now wide fields of tender wheat. To hungry emus, these fields looked like an unexpected gift from nature. To farmers, they represented months of exhausting labor. Neither side wished the other harm. Their needs had simply begun to overlap. The stage was quietly being set for one of history's most unusual misunderstandings. As the moon rises higher over the peaceful farms, the families settle into bed, hoping tomorrow will bring gentle weather and healthy crops. Far beyond the fences, under the very same moonlight, thousands upon thousands of emus continue their slow seasonal journey across Australia. With every steady step, they come a little closer to the wheat fields. And in our next chapter, we will gently witness the Great Migration itself, when the enormous flocks finally arrive, transforming quiet farms into the setting for an extraordinary story that no one could have imagined. As the quiet night carries us onward, let us continue our gentle walk across the Australian countryside. The first light of morning is slowly spreading across the horizon. The sky glows with soft shades of pale gold and light blue. The cool air feels fresh after the long night. Tiny drops of dew rest upon the wheat plants, sparkling whenever the rising sun touches them. Everything appears peaceful. A gentle breeze moves across the fields. Magpies sing from the tops of fence posts. Somewhere in the distance, sheep begin to stir. A rooster calls from a nearby farmhouse. It feels like another ordinary day. The farmers wake before sunrise, just as they always do. A kettle boils over the stove. Fresh tea is poured into well-used cups. Simple breakfasts are eaten quietly. There is little need for many words. The day's work is already waiting. One farmer pulls on his boots and steps outside. He pauses for a moment. The air smells clean. The fields look healthy. The young wheat is growing well. After months of hard work, everything finally seems to be coming together. He smiles softly. Perhaps this year will be a good harvest. He begins walking toward the nearest paddock. As he reaches the top of a gentle hill, something catches his eye. Far away, near the edge of the property, small shapes are moving. At first, he thinks they are kangaroos. That would not be unusual. Kangaroos often pass through the countryside. But these shapes move differently. Their necks rise high above the grass. Their bodies sway gently with each long step. The farmer narrows his eyes. Emus. A few dozen of them. He is not surprised. Emus have always wandered through this country. Usually, they continue on their way after a short time. He watches quietly. The birds walk calmly toward a nearby fence. For a moment they stop. Several stretch their necks curiously. One bird gently nudges the wire. Another walks beside the fence looking for an opening. Then, almost without effort, several birds slip through a damaged section. The others quickly follow. The farmer sighs. He makes a note to repair that fence later. Surely the birds will leave before too much damage is done. He continues with his morning work. Hours pass peacefully. The sun climbs higher into the sky. The warmth slowly spreads across the fields. When the farmer returns that afternoon, he notices something unexpected. There are many more emus. Not dozens. Hundreds. The birds are scattered across the wheat like gentle waves, moving through an ocean of green. Some peck at the tender plants. Others simply walk. Their long feet press softly into the earth. Every step bends young stalks beneath them. The birds are not rushing. They do not seem frightened. They simply move forward at their own calm pace. The farmer stands silently. He has never seen so many. Across neighboring farms, other families are making the very same discovery. One farmer rides his horse to visit a nearby neighbor. "I've counted hundreds." The neighbor nods slowly. "I think there are even more on my side." Another neighbor joins them. "They're everywhere." No one raises their voice. No one panics. They simply look across the fields together. The birds continue eating. The farmers quietly wonder what should be done. As the days pass, the number of emus continues to grow. The Great Migration has begun. Every year, emus travel across large parts of Australia in search of food and water. This journey is older than any farm, older than any road, older than any fence. Generation after generation has followed these same ancient paths. But the landscape is no longer the same. Where native grasses once covered the plains, endless fields of wheat now stretch across the countryside. To an emu, these fields look almost too good to be true. Fresh green plants, soft young shoots, water nearby, wide open space, everything a hungry bird could hope to find. The birds do not understand that these crops belong to someone. They do not know how many weeks have been spent clearing the land. They do not know how many months the farmers have waited for rain. They cannot understand bank loans or harvest prices. They simply eat, one beakful at a time, one step after another. Imagine walking quietly among the flock. The birds make surprisingly gentle sounds. Soft grunts, low drumming calls, the rustle of feathers brushing against one another. Their feet make almost no noise upon the dry earth. There is no chaos, no excitement, only thousands of calm birds moving together beneath the bright Australian sky. Some younger birds stop to examine unusual objects. A shiny bucket, a discarded hat, a piece of farm equipment. Their curiosity makes them pause for a moment before continuing their journey. Older birds keep walking steadily. They seem to know exactly where they are going. Although no map guides them, their path feels certain. The wheat disappears surprisingly quickly. Each individual emu does not eat very much, but together they form an enormous crowd. Hundreds become thousands. Thousands continue arriving. Soon some reports speak of nearly 20,000 emus moving across parts of Western Australia. It is an astonishing sight. Imagine standing on a small hill. As far as you can see, tall birds are scattered across the landscape. Some disappear behind gentle rises. Others emerge again moments later. The flock seems almost endless. It moves like a slow river flowing across the countryside. Farmers begin spending more and more time trying to protect their crops. Some wave hats and jackets. Others shout loudly. Children clap their hands. Dogs bark excitedly. At first, the birds scatter. They run with surprising speed. Their long legs carry them across the fields in graceful strides. But after a little while, many quietly return. The wheat is simply too tempting. Some farmers climb into old trucks and slowly drive toward the birds. The engines rumble across dusty tracks. Clouds of fine red soil rise behind the wheels. The emus step aside, then continue eating somewhere else. It becomes a strange game. The farmers move the birds from one field. The birds wander into another. Fence repairs become constant work. The large birds often find weak places where wire has loosened. Sometimes several birds simply squeeze through an opening. Other times they accidentally break section as they pass. The damaged fences create another unexpected problem. Rabbits discover the gaps. Soon rabbits begin entering the fields as well. The wheat now faces pressure from more than one direction. Each evening, tired farmers gather around their kitchen tables. Boots are removed. Hands are washed. Simple meals are served. Conversation always returns to the same subject. The birds came again today. They crossed the western paddock. I repaired the fence. They found another opening. I've never seen anything like it. Across the countryside, the stories become remarkably similar. Nobody blames the birds. Many farmers even admire them. They are beautiful creatures. Strong, healthy, perfectly suited to the Australian landscape. The problem is simply their number. 1 or 2 emus are welcome visitors. 20,000 become something entirely different. The government had encouraged farmers to grow more wheat. Now those successful fields had become irresistible feeding grounds. Nature had quietly discovered a new opportunity. The farmers begin writing letters. Some travel into town to speak with local officials. Others meet during community gatherings. Everyone agrees on one thing. They need help. Not because they dislike wildlife. Not because they wish to harm the birds. But because entire harvests are now at risk. Without successful harvests, many families could lose everything they have worked so hard to build. The requests slowly make their way through local government offices. Reports are written. Numbers are counted. Officials read descriptions of damaged crops and broken fences. Some are surprised. Others find the reports difficult to believe. Could birds truly cause this much trouble? The stories continue arriving. Again and again. From different farms, different towns, different districts, all describing the same quiet invasion. Meanwhile, the emus continue following the only life they have ever known. They wake with the sunrise, walk across the open plains, eat when food is available, drink when they find water, rest during the hottest hours, then continue walking. There is no plan, no strategy, no leader giving commands. Each bird simply follows instinct. Yet together, they behave almost like a great living river flowing across the countryside. Their steady movement seems impossible to stop. Some journalists begin hearing about the unusual situation. The idea sounds almost unbelievable. Thousands of giant birds eating wheat across Western Australia. People in distant cities smile when they hear the stories. Surely they must be exaggerated. Surely a few farmers can manage a flock of birds. Those living on the farms know differently. They see the damage every single day. They watch months of careful work disappear one mouthful at a time. Still, most remain patient. They hope the birds will soon continue their migration. Perhaps another rainstorm somewhere else will encourage the emus to move on. Perhaps nature will solve the problem on its own. But the weeks pass. The birds remain. More letters reach government offices. More meetings are held. Eventually, someone suggests an idea that sounds both practical and unusual. If these farmers are mostly former soldiers, and if the birds are arriving in such enormous numbers, perhaps the army could help. It is only a suggestion at first. A quiet thought spoken around a meeting table. No one yet realizes that this simple proposal will soon become one of the most famous and amusing stories in Australian history. As the evening shadows grow longer across the wheat fields, the emus settle quietly beneath scattered trees. The farmers return to their homes, tired but hopeful that tomorrow may bring a solution. The stars begin to appear once again above the endless Australian sky. And in our next chapter, we will gently meet the government officials and the soldiers who are asked to solve a problem unlike any they have ever faced. A challenge involving no enemy army, but thousands of calm, curious, and surprisingly swift emus wandering peacefully across the golden fields. As the quiet evening settles across the Australian countryside, let us continue our gentle journey. The last light of the sun slowly slips below the horizon. Long shadows stretch across the wheat fields. The air becomes cooler with every passing minute. A flock of parrots flies toward the trees where they will spend the night. The farmers finish their work for the day. Tools are carefully placed back inside wooden sheds. Horses are brushed and fed. Dogs curl up on shaded porches. Inside the farmhouses, warm lamps begin to glow behind simple curtains. It is another peaceful evening. Yet behind many quiet conversations, there is growing concern. The wheat fields are changing. Every morning, fresh footprints appear in the soil. Broken stalks lie across the ground. Fence posts lean at odd angles. The emus continue their slow journey through the farming districts. Each day brings another flock. Then another. The farmers are not frightened. They are simply running out of ideas. Imagine sitting around a sturdy wooden table inside one of these homes. The family has finished supper. A teapot sits in the center of the table. The father unfolds a newspaper. The mother quietly mends a shirt by the light of an oil lamp. The children listen while the adults talk. The birds came again. They crossed the southern field. I repaired the fence yesterday. They found another opening. No one speaks with anger. Only quiet disappointment. Months of careful work seem to disappear a little more each day. Outside, the wind gently brushes through the wheat. Inside, everyone wonders what tomorrow will bring. Across Western Australia, similar conversations are taking place. Neighbors visit one another after long days in the fields. Some arrive on horseback. Others drive dusty trucks along rough country roads. They exchange stories. Nearly every farm has experienced the same problem. Some have lost only a small amount of wheat. Others have watched large sections of their crops disappear beneath thousands of hungry birds. The farmers begin organizing meetings. These gatherings are calm and practical. Everyone hopes that together they can find a solution. Imagine a simple country hall. Wooden benches fill the room. Lanterns hang from the ceiling. The smell of fresh timber mixes with the scent of dusty boots and warm tea. Men remove their hats as they enter. Women greet neighbors with friendly smiles. Children sit quietly near the back of the room. The conversation begins. One farmer stands. He explains how nearly 300 emus crossed his land in a single afternoon. Another describes broken fences that took several days to repair. A third explains that rabbits entered through the damaged fences, creating even more problems. Each story sounds different, yet all lead to the same conclusion. The birds are arriving in numbers unlike anything anyone has seen before. Someone suggests building stronger fences. Another recommends hiring more workers. Others quietly shake their heads. The farms are simply too large. The costs are too great. Many families are already struggling financially. The discussion continues late into the evening. Eventually, attention turns toward the government. After all, many of these farmers had once served their country during the Great War. They had accepted government land. They had worked exactly as they had been asked. Now they hoped the government might offer some assistance. Letters begin arriving at government offices. Some are carefully handwritten. Others are typed on simple machines. Each tells the story of damaged crops and growing losses. Officials read them one by one. At first, some find the reports surprising. Thousands of large birds. Entire fields affected. It almost sounds unbelievable. But more letters continue arriving. The reports all tell remarkably similar stories. The situation can no longer be ignored. Government officials begin discussing possible solutions. Imagine a meeting room in Perth. Large wooden desks stand neatly arranged. Maps of Western Australia hang upon the walls. Papers cover the tables. Officials quietly examine reports from across the farming districts. One man adjusts his spectacles. Another traces roads across a map with his finger. Someone calculates the amount of wheat that could be lost if the problem continues. The room remains calm. There is no shouting, no panic, only thoughtful discussion. The question is simple. How can thousands of wandering birds be moved away from valuable farmland? Several ideas are considered. Perhaps more fencing could be built. Perhaps local hunters could help. Perhaps the birds would naturally move on after a short time. But every passing week brings fresh reports. The emus remain. Someone finally speaks about another possibility. Many of the farmers are former soldiers. Perhaps the Australian army could provide assistance. The room grows quiet. It is certainly an unusual suggestion. The military is trained to solve difficult problems. Its members understand discipline. They have equipment that ordinary farmers do not possess. Perhaps they could help reduce the enormous flocks. The idea slowly gains support. It is not presented as a grand military campaign. It is simply viewed as practical assistance for struggling farming communities. Permission is eventually granted. The army will become involved. News spreads surprisingly quickly through the countryside. Farmers hear the reports from neighbors. Local newspapers begin mentioning the government's decision. People are curious. Some are hopeful. Others wonder whether soldiers can truly solve a problem created by wildlife. The story is already beginning to sound unusual. Imagine the reaction in a small country store. A few farmers gather while purchasing supplies. One folds a newspaper beneath his arm. They say the army is coming. Another raises an eyebrow. The army. For the emus. The room grows quiet for a moment. Then several people smile. It sounds almost impossible. Yet it is true. For perhaps the first time in history, trained soldiers are preparing to assist farmers against large wandering birds. The army selects an experienced officer to oversee the operation. His name is Major Meredith. He is a professional soldier. Calm, organized, experienced. He has served his country with dedication. Like everyone else involved, he approaches the assignment seriously. He understands that the farmers genuinely need help. The unusual nature of the task does not lessen its importance. Major Meredith gathers a small group of soldiers. It is not a large force. Only a handful of men will take part. They prepare their equipment carefully. Among the equipment are Lewis machine guns. These weapons had been used during the First World War. They were reliable and well known to experienced soldiers. The men also prepare trucks, ammunition, supplies, food, and camping equipment. Imagine these soldiers loading their vehicles. Wooden crates are lifted into place. Canvas tents are rolled tightly. Water containers are secured. Maps are folded carefully. The mood is professional. Although the assignment is unusual, the soldiers intend to perform their duty well. Some of them cannot help smiling quietly. During the war, they had crossed battlefields filled with trenches and artillery. Now they are traveling to farming country in search of emus. Life often leads people down unexpected paths. The journey into Western Australia takes time. Roads in the early 1930s are not always smooth. Dust rises behind the trucks as they travel through the countryside. The landscape stretches endlessly in every direction. Golden grasslands, scattered eucalyptus trees, rolling hills, occasional farms standing alone beneath enormous skis. The soldiers pass small towns where curious residents wave as the convoy rolls through. Children point excitedly. Adults pause outside general stores to watch. News has already spread. Everyone knows why the soldiers have come. At last, the convoy reaches the farming districts, where the largest flocks have been reported. The farmers welcome them warmly. Hands are shaken. Introductions are made. Tea is offered. Stories are shared late into the evening. Farmers describe where the birds usually appear, which fences they cross, which watering places they visit, which fields suffer the greatest damage. Major Meredith listens carefully. He asks thoughtful questions. He studies maps. He plans. The soldiers also spend time observing the countryside. They quickly discover something important. The farms are enormous. The open country seems almost endless. Unlike battlefields, there are no clear front lines. The emus appear in one place during the morning and another place by afternoon. They move constantly. They are fast. Very fast. One farmer quietly laughs as he points toward a distant flock. They'll be over there before breakfast, and somewhere else before lunch. The soldiers smile politely. Soon they will discover just how true those words are. As darkness settles across the camps, everyone prepares for the following day. The soldiers clean their equipment. The farmers return home to their families. The emus rest quietly beneath the stars, completely unaware that people are making careful plans nearby. The birds know nothing of meetings, nothing of government decisions, nothing of soldiers or newspapers. Tomorrow will simply be another day of walking, eating, drinking, and following ancient paths across the Australian landscape. Yet tomorrow will also mark the beginning of one of the most unusual military operations ever recorded. As the stars slowly wheel across the vast Australian sky, and the cool night breeze whispers through the wheat, let us leave both the soldiers and the emus resting peacefully. In our next chapter, we will gently follow Major Meredith and his men as they begin their first attempts to protect the farms, only to discover that their calm, feathered opponents are far quicker, far more unpredictable, and far more difficult to catch than anyone had imagined. As the night grows deeper, let us continue our slow and peaceful journey. The stars remain bright above the Australian countryside. The moon hangs quietly over the wheat fields, bathing the land in soft silver light. The camp where the soldiers are resting is almost silent now. Only a gentle breeze stirs the canvas of the tents. Somewhere nearby, a horse shifts its weight. A kettle, still warm from the evening tea, rests beside a small campfire that has faded into glowing embers. The soldiers sleep. The farmers sleep. Even the emus rest beneath scattered trees and low shrubs. For a little while, the entire countryside is still. But as every morning does, dawn slowly arrives. The eastern sky begins to brighten. The stars gently fade. A cool mist lingers over the fields. Birdsong begins softly, one voice at a time. Magpies call from distant fence posts. Cockatoos glide across the pale sky. The peaceful sounds of another Australian morning fill the air. Inside the military camp, the soldiers awaken early. Years of training have made early mornings feel natural. Blankets are folded neatly. Boots are laced. Breakfast is prepared over small cooking fires. Simple meals of bread, tea, and preserved food are quietly enjoyed. No one speaks very loudly. Everyone knows there is work ahead. Major Meredith steps outside his tent. He looks across the countryside. The morning air feels fresh. The fields stretch toward the horizon in every direction. Golden grass sways gently in the breeze. At first glance, everything appears perfectly peaceful. It is difficult to imagine that thousands of birds have caused such concern. One of the nearby farmers arrives on horseback. He removes his hat politely. "Good morning, Major." "Morning. I saw a large flock just after sunrise." "Where?" The farmer points toward a distant ridge. They're moving slowly across the eastern paddocks. Major Meredith thanks him. The soldiers begin gathering their equipment. The Lewis machine guns are carefully checked. Boxes of ammunition are loaded onto trucks. Water bottles are filled. Maps are folded and placed inside leather bags. Everything is done with calm precision. The soldiers climb into their vehicles. Engines rumble to life. Dust begins rising behind the wheels as they drive across rough country tracks. The farmers watch with quiet hope. Perhaps today will solve the problem. Imagine riding with the convoy. The trucks move steadily over uneven ground. Sometimes they cross dry creek beds. Sometimes they follow narrow dirt roads winding through open country. The landscape seems endless. There are no tall buildings, no crowded streets, only sky, fields, bushland, and silence. Then one soldier points ahead. There, everyone looks. Far across the plain stands a large flock of emus. Hundreds of them, perhaps more. They move slowly through the wheat, lowering their heads to feed before lifting them again to scan the landscape. From this distance they appear peaceful, almost graceful. Major Meredith studies them carefully. He has faced difficult situations before. During the Great War, every decision carried enormous consequences. Compared with that, this assignment seems almost gentle. Still, he knows the farmers are depending upon him. He decides to move carefully. The trucks slow down. The soldiers quietly climb out. The plan seems simple. Approach the flock without causing alarm. Move into position. Then begin the operation. For a few moments, everything goes exactly as planned. The birds continue feeding. Some barely notice the approaching men. Others glance up briefly before returning to the wheat. The soldiers move closer. Closer still. The distance becomes shorter. Perhaps another few moments. Then something changes. One emu lifts its head. It stands perfectly still. Its large dark eyes quietly watch the approaching figures. Another bird notices. Then another. Within seconds, a ripple passes through the flock. Without panic, without confusion, the birds simply begin walking away. Then walking becomes running. Their long legs stretch into smooth, powerful strides. Almost instantly, the peaceful flock transforms into hundreds of moving shapes crossing the countryside. The soldiers are surprised. The birds are astonishingly fast. Far faster than many expected. Major Meredith calmly gives instructions. The soldiers begin their work. Yet the open landscape creates unexpected difficulties. The emus do not stay together. Instead, they separate into many smaller groups. One flock heads toward a line of trees. Another moves across open grassland. Several disappear behind low hills. Within moments, What had seemed like one large target has become dozens of small ones scattered across miles of countryside. The soldiers pause. This is not what they expected. One farmer quietly smiles. I told you. They don't stay together. He is not mocking anyone. He simply knows these birds. He has watched them for months. The emus understand the landscape far better than any newcomer. Imagine watching them run. Their movements are smooth and steady. Their powerful legs carry them effortlessly across rough ground. Rocks, bushes, dry creek beds. Nothing seems to slow them. Dust rises gently behind every stride. Their feathers ripple in the wind. From a distance, they almost resemble small boats gliding across gentle waves. The soldiers continue following. They remain patient, professional, methodical. Throughout the day, they search for opportunities. Sometimes they find another flock. Sometimes only a handful of birds. Each encounter brings the same surprise. The emus rarely move in predictable ways. If one direction becomes blocked, they quietly choose another. If several birds scatter, they rarely scatter in the same direction. Some turn left, others right. Several simply continue straight ahead. It becomes surprisingly difficult to anticipate their movements. Major Meredith watches carefully. He is impressed, not because the birds are clever in the way people sometimes imagine, but because they are perfectly adapted to this environment. Everything about them suits the Australian landscape. Their speed, their eyesight, their endurance, their ability to move across rough country. They have evolved here over countless thousands of years. The soldiers have only just arrived. As the afternoon grows warmer, the heat begins shimmering above the fields. The trucks become coated in fine red dust. The men wipe sweat from their faces. Water bottles are passed around. Everyone rests briefly beneath the shade of a eucalyptus tree. The farmers join them. Tea is poured from simple flasks. Conversation remains relaxed. One older farmer chuckles softly. I've chased them with horses. My sons chased them on foot. My neighbor tried with his truck. They always seem to stay one step ahead. The soldiers laugh quietly. Already they understand exactly what he means. The mood remains friendly. No one is discouraged. The operation has only just begun. There will be other opportunities, other flocks, other days. As the afternoon slowly becomes evening, something beautiful happens across the countryside. The sunlight softens. The harsh brightness of midday fades into warm golden colors. Long shadows stretch across the fields. The wheat glows almost like polished gold beneath the setting sun. The emus begin slowing their pace. Many gather in small groups. Some drink from farm dams. Others rest among patches of tall grass. The soldiers observe quietly from a distance. One young private watches through binoculars. They look peaceful. Major Meredith nods. They are. Neither the soldiers nor the birds seem filled with anger. Both are simply following their own purpose. The soldiers have been asked to protect the farms. The emus are searching for food. It is one of those unusual moments in history where neither side truly wishes harm upon the other. Their paths have simply crossed. As darkness gently settles across the countryside once again, the soldiers return to camp. Boots are dusty. Clothes are warm from the day's sun. Equipment is carefully cleaned before supper. Around the campfire, the men quietly discuss what they have learned. The birds are much quicker than expected. They scatter naturally into small groups. They know the land remarkably well. Tomorrow will require new ideas. Major Meredith studies his map beneath the lantern light. He marks the places where the largest flocks were seen. He listens to the advice offered by local farmers. Every conversation teaches him something new. Nearby, the farmers return to their own homes. Families gather around evening meals. Children ask questions about the soldiers. Parents smile gently. Yes, they're doing their best. Outside, under the same blanket of stars, the emus settle peacefully for another night. They know nothing of maps, nothing of military planning, nothing of newspapers beginning to take interest in the unusual events unfolding across Western Australia. Tomorrow, they will simply wake with the sunrise and continue walking, just as their ancestors have done for countless generations. But tomorrow will also bring the first serious attempts to stop the great flocks. And those efforts will soon become stories repeated across Australia, stories so surprising that, many years later, people around the world would still smile when they heard about the remarkable Great Emu War. As the night grows quieter and the wind whispers softly through the wheat, let us rest here for now. In our next chapter, we will gently follow the first major operation against the great flocks, where careful planning, unexpected setbacks, and the astonishing speed of the emus begin to turn an ordinary farming problem into an unforgettable piece of history. As the quiet hours of the night slowly give way to another peaceful morning, let us continue our gentle walk through this unusual chapter of history. The stars fade one by one. The moon slips quietly toward the western horizon. A cool breeze carries the fresh scent of eucalyptus leaves across the countryside. Mist hangs low over the wheat fields. The world feels calm, patient, almost as though nature itself is taking a slow breath before another day begins. Inside the military camp, the first signs of movement appear. A lantern flickers inside one of the tents. Someone quietly folds a blanket. Another soldier pours water into a small kettle. Soon the soft sounds of morning fill the camp. The crackle of a cooking fire. The gentle clink of metal cups. The low murmur of friendly conversation. Breakfast is simple. Fresh bread, tea, perhaps a little preserved meat. Nothing fancy. The soldiers eat slowly. They know the day ahead may be long. Nearby, Major Meredith studies a map spread across the hood of one of the trucks. Several local farmers stand beside him. Their weathered hands point toward different parts of the countryside. Yesterday they crossed here. Another farmer nods. And another large flock came from the north. But a third traces a finger toward a small dam. They usually stop there to drink. Major Meredith listens carefully. He understands that no map is more valuable than the knowledge of people who have lived on this land for years. Every farmer knows something different. One understands the hills. Another knows where the birds rest during the hottest hours. Someone else remembers which fences the emus most often cross. Together, they slowly build a clearer picture. There is no rush, only quiet planning. The goal today is straightforward. Find one of the larger flocks. Move into position carefully. Protect the nearby crops. The soldiers climb into their trucks once more. Engines start with a deep rumble. Dust rises gently behind the tires as the convoy heads across the open countryside. The morning sun climbs higher. Its light paints the fields with soft golden colors. Birds glide overhead. Kangaroos pause briefly before hopping away into the bush. Australia feels peaceful. It is difficult to imagine that such a calm landscape could become famous around the world. After traveling for some time, one of the scouts raises his hand. There, everyone follows his gaze. Far ahead, scattered across a broad valley, stands a very large flock of emus. There are hundreds, perhaps nearly 1,000. Some peck quietly at the wheat. Others walk slowly toward a nearby waterhole. The birds appear completely relaxed. Major Meredith studies the scene through binoculars. This may be the best opportunity yet. He quietly gives instructions. The trucks stop behind a gentle rise where they cannot easily be seen. The soldiers climb down carefully. No loud voices. No sudden movements. Only slow, steady preparation. Imagine standing among them. The cool morning breeze brushes gently across your face. The wheat sways softly all around. The distant birds continue feeding, completely unaware. Everything seems perfectly still. One soldier whispers with a hopeful smile, "I think we've finally got them." Another quietly nods. Perhaps today will be different. Perhaps today the farmers will finally receive the help they have been waiting for. The soldiers move into position. Every step is measured. Every movement is calm. The distance between the soldiers and the flock slowly becomes smaller. Closer, closer still. For a brief moment, everything seems to be working. Then something almost magical happens. One emu notices movement. It lifts its long neck high into the air. It does not cry out. It does not panic. It simply watches. Another bird notices. Then another. Within seconds, dozens of heads rise above the wheat. It is almost as though an invisible message has passed through the flock. Without any clear leader, without any obvious signal, the birds begin moving. Not wildly, not chaotically, simply together. The peaceful feeding suddenly becomes steady running. Long legs carry them across the landscape with astonishing speed. The soldiers move forward. But almost immediately, the flock begins breaking apart. It is one of the most remarkable sights anyone present has ever witnessed. Instead of remaining together as one enormous group, the emus naturally divide into smaller flocks. Some run toward low hills. Others disappear between scattered trees. Several head across open grassland. Within moments, hundreds of birds have become dozens of smaller groups spread across miles of countryside. One soldier lowers his binoculars. "I've never seen anything like that." Neither has anyone else. The farmers quietly shake their heads. They have watched the birds do this many times. It seems completely natural to them. The landscape itself helps the emus. Small ridges hide them from view. Dry creek beds offer easy pathways. Bushes provide brief shelter. Every feature of the countryside seems familiar to the birds. The soldiers continue their work throughout the morning. Sometimes they spot another large group. Sometimes only 20 or 30 birds. Each time the pattern repeats. The emus remain wonderfully unpredictable. If one path is blocked, they choose another. If several birds become separated, they somehow continue moving without confusion. There is no panic among them. Only smooth, steady movement. It almost appears graceful. By midday, the Australian sun shines brightly overhead. Heat shimmers above the fields. The air becomes warm and dry. The soldiers pause beneath several eucalyptus trees for a short rest. Water bottles are passed around. Hats are adjusted. The farmers join them once again. One older farmer smiles kindly. I don't think they realize they're supposed to lose. The soldiers laugh softly. Even Major Meredith smiles. There is no frustration in the laughter. Only appreciation for the unusual situation. History is full of surprising moments. This is certainly becoming one of them. After their short rest, everyone returns to work. This time, the soldiers try a different idea. Rather than approaching across open fields, they quietly position themselves near a watering place where the birds often gather during the afternoon. It seems like a sensible plan. Water is precious in Australia. Surely many emus will eventually arrive. The men wait patiently. The afternoon passes slowly. The breeze gently stirs the tall grasses. Dragonflies hover above the water. A pair of ducks lands quietly on the surface of the dam. Everything feels wonderfully peaceful. Eventually, the first emus appear. A small group walks carefully toward the water. Behind them come several more. Then dozens. Soon the familiar sight returns. Hundreds of tall birds move steadily across the landscape. The soldiers remain perfectly still. The birds continue approaching. Closer, closer. The waiting feels almost endless. One soldier later remembered how quiet those moments seemed. Even the wind appeared to pause. Then, just before the birds reached the water, something unexpected happened. A nearby truck, parked on uneven ground, shifted slightly. It made only a small sound. A simple creak. Barely noticeable. Yet the nearest emu heard it immediately. Its head lifted. Its eyes searched the landscape. Within seconds, the same silent message spread through the flock once again. Without confusion, without rushing, the birds calmly turned. Then they ran. Hundreds of powerful legs carried them away across the plain. The soldiers watched in amazement. The opportunity had disappeared almost instantly. One young private quietly removed his hat and scratched his head. They hear everything. A farmer standing beside him nodded. They've had thousands of years to learn. As afternoon slowly became evening, everyone realized something important. The operation was proving far more difficult than anyone had imagined. The challenge was not simply the number of birds. It was the remarkable way they moved. They were fast, observant, perfectly suited to the open country. The soldiers respected them more with every passing hour. So did the farmers. No one had expected such a challenge from a bird that spent much of its day peacefully walking through the grass. As the sun drifted toward the horizon, the sky filled with beautiful shades of orange, pink, and soft purple. The countryside seemed almost magical. Long shadows stretched across the wheat fields. The emus gradually disappeared into the distance, becoming little more than dark shapes against the glowing landscape. The soldiers packed their equipment. Dust covered their boots. The trucks were coated with fine red earth. Everyone looked tired, but no one seemed discouraged. Instead, they appeared thoughtful. Every unsuccessful attempt had taught them something new. Around the evening campfire, tea was poured once again. Maps were unfolded. The day's events were discussed calmly. Major Meredith listened more than he spoke. He knew that solving this problem would require patience rather than force. The farmers offered more suggestions. The soldiers shared their observations. Together, they slowly adapted. None of them could know that newspaper reporters in distant cities were beginning to hear about these curious events. Before long, the story would spread far beyond Western Australia. People would read about soldiers, wheat fields, and thousands of wandering emus with a mixture of surprise and amusement. But here, under the quiet Australian stars, none of that mattered yet. For the farmers, this was still simply daily life. For the soldiers, it remained an unusual assignment carried out with professionalism. And for the emus, tomorrow would be another peaceful day of following ancient paths across the land they had called home for countless generations. As the night grows quiet once more, let us leave the camp wrapped in gentle silence. In our next chapter, We will discover how word of these remarkable encounters began to spread across Australia, how newspapers turned a local farming problem into national conversation, and how the calm, curious emus slowly earned a reputation that no one could have imagined when their long journey first began. As the night grows even quieter, let us continue our gentle journey across the wide Australian landscape. The campfire has burned down to glowing embers. Most of the soldiers have settled into their tents. The farmers are asleep in their homes after another long day. The emus rest quietly beneath scattered trees, their feathers rising and falling gently as the cool night breeze passes over them. Above them all, thousands upon thousands of stars fill the sky. The Southern Cross shines brightly. The Milky Way stretches from one horizon to the other like a pale river of light. It is a peaceful night. If someone had looked down from those stars, they would have seen only quiet farms, sleeping birds, and a handful of soldiers. Nothing about the scene would have suggested that this strange little story was about to become known across an entire nation. Morning arrives once again. The first rays of sunlight touch the wheat fields. The dew sparkles on every blade of grass. A kookaburra begins its familiar call from a nearby gum tree. Its cheerful voice echoes across the countryside. The soldiers wake. So do the farmers. The routine has already become familiar. Breakfast, tea, maps, equipment, conversation about where the birds were seen yesterday. The work begins again. Some soldiers travel toward the eastern farms. Others remain near areas where large flocks have recently gathered. Major Meredith continues listening carefully to local advice. Every farmer seems to know another useful detail. They usually cross that ridge after sunrise. They rest near the creek when the afternoon becomes hot. They often return through this valley before sunset. The soldiers appreciate every piece of information. The local people understand this country better than anyone. Even so, the emus continue to surprise them. One morning, a flock appears near a freshly planted field. By the time the soldiers arrive, the birds have already disappeared over a distant hill. Later that afternoon, another farmer reports hundreds of emus several miles away. The trucks drive there as quickly as the rough roads allow. But once again, the birds have quietly moved on. It begins to feel as though the emus are always one step ahead. Not because they are planning anything, simply because they are always moving, always walking, always following food and water across the enormous landscape. Meanwhile, something else is happening. Far from the wheat fields, far from the dusty roads, in towns and cities across Australia, editors sit inside newspaper offices. Imagine one of those offices. It is filled with wooden desks. Sheets of paper are stacked neatly. Typewriters click steadily throughout the room. Telephones ring from time to time. Reporters arrive carrying notebooks filled with stories from across the country. Some stories concern politics. Others describe sporting events. A few report changes in the weather. Then someone places another report upon the editor's desk. It tells of soldiers in Western Australia. That part seems ordinary enough, but the rest of the story causes the editor to pause. Soldiers sent to deal with emus. He reads the report again, then smiles, not because anyone is suffering, but because the situation sounds so wonderfully unusual. He calls over another reporter. You should read this. Soon several people gather around the desk. One shakes his head in surprise. Another laughs softly. It's true. So it seems. The editor decides that readers will certainly find this interesting. The story is prepared for publication. The following morning, newspapers begin arriving in towns and cities. Bundles of fresh papers are unloaded from trains. Newsboys carry stacks along busy streets. Shopkeepers place copies near their entrances. People stop to buy the morning edition before beginning work. Imagine opening one of those newspapers. Among reports of government decisions and local events, you notice a curious headline. It speaks of soldiers, machine guns, and emus. At first, many readers think it must be a joke. They read more carefully. No, the story is real. Across breakfast tables, families begin discussing it. A father lowers his newspaper. Have you heard about this? His wife smiles with curiosity. What is it? The army is helping farmers with emus. The children look up from their porridge. The birds? Yes, the big ones. The family smiles together. It is certainly one of the strangest stories they have heard in quite some time. In cafes, customers discuss the news over cups of tea. At railway stations, travelers fold newspapers beneath their arms while talking about the remarkable events. Office workers mention it during lunch breaks. Even people who know very little about farming become interested. Many Australians have seen emus before. They know the birds are fast. They know they are part of the country's unique wildlife. But few had imagined that they would become the center of such an unusual operation. Meanwhile, the farmers themselves pay little attention to the growing attention. They are still concerned with much simpler matters. Will enough wheat survive? Can the fences be repaired? Will rain arrive soon? For them, life continues exactly as before. The newspapers may find the story amusing, but every damaged field represents real work, real time, real hope. One afternoon, a reporter decides to visit Western Australia. He wishes to see the situation with his own eyes. Imagine him climbing aboard a train. His notebook rests inside his coat pocket. He has written about elections and town meetings before. Now he is traveling to write about birds. The journey takes time. Australia is vast. The train rolls steadily across long stretches of countryside. Through the window he watches open grasslands, distant hills, lonely farmhouses, and endless skis. Eventually, he reaches the farming districts. The first thing he notices is the silence. The countryside is much quieter than the busy cities. The air feels fresh. The horizon seems endless. He meets several farmers. Each tells a similar story. We've worked hard. We don't dislike the birds, but there are simply too many. The reporter listens carefully. He writes every detail into his notebook. Later, he visits the military camp. Major Meredith welcomes him politely. The major speaks calmly and professionally. He explains that the operation is proving more challenging than expected. The countryside is vast. The birds move constantly. Every day brings new surprises. The reporter appreciates the major's honesty. There is no boasting, no exaggeration, only quiet determination. Later that afternoon, the reporter finally sees the emus for himself. Hundreds of them, walking peacefully through the landscape. They appear almost elegant. Their long necks sway gently. Their feathers shimmer softly in the sunlight. Every now and then, one bird pauses to look around before continuing its slow journey. The reporter cannot help but admire them. They're beautiful, he quietly says. One nearby farmer nods. They are. That's never been the problem. It's how many there are. Those simple words remain with the reporter. That evening, he sits beside a lantern inside his small room. His notebook lies open before him. He begins writing. He describes the endless wheat fields, the hardworking farming families, the patient soldiers, and the remarkable birds that seem to appear almost everywhere. His article is balanced. He avoids making fun of anyone. Instead, he writes about the unusual meeting between people and nature. When his story is published a few days later, readers enjoy it very much. Many smile at the unusual details. Others feel sympathy for the farmers. Some admire the determination of the soldiers. Nearly everyone becomes fascinated by the emus themselves. Little by little, the story spreads farther. Radio announcers briefly mention it. Travelers carry the tale from town to town. Letters are written between friends. Have you heard about the emus in Western Australia? Yes, I read about them yesterday. It sounds unbelievable. Yet it is true. The quiet farming districts have unexpectedly become the center of national attention. Still, despite all the growing interest, life on the farms changes very little. The wheat continues growing. The farmers continue working. The soldiers continue searching. The emus continue walking. Nature follows its own rhythm, paying no attention at all to newspaper headlines. As the sun slowly sets once again, the sky becomes a masterpiece of gentle colors. Orange fades into pink. Pink fades into lavender. Finally, deep blue returns as the first stars appear overhead. The soldiers gather once more around their evening campfire. One of them unfolds a newspaper that has just arrived from the city. There, printed clearly across the page, is the story of their unusual assignment. Several soldiers smile. One quietly chuckles. Another shakes his head in disbelief. It seems we've become famous. Major Meredith smiles politely, but says very little. He is still focused on the work that remains to be done. Tomorrow will bring another sunrise, another search, another meeting with the remarkable birds that continue wandering across the Australian plains. As the night grows still once again, let us leave the newspapers folded beside the campfire and the stars shining peacefully above. In our next chapter, we will gently follow the soldiers as they try new methods to protect the wheat fields, and we will discover how the clever movements of the emus slowly transformed an unusual assignment into one of the most memorable stories in Australian history. As the stars slowly fade into the soft colors of another Australian dawn, let us continue our peaceful journey. The night has been calm. A gentle breeze has whispered through the tall wheat. Somewhere beyond the hills, an emu has given its low, deep call before settling into silence once more. The world feels rested. The first golden light appears on the eastern horizon. Morning birds greet the day. The air is cool enough that every breath feels fresh. Drops of dew cling to every blade of grass, shining like tiny jewels beneath the rising sun. In the military camp, another day begins with familiar routines. Canvas tents rustle softly as soldiers emerge into the cool morning air. One man stretches his tired shoulders. Another quietly pours fresh water into a kettle. Soon the comforting smell of hot tea drifts through the camp. Breakfast is simple as always. Fresh bread, tea, perhaps a little jam if supplies allow. The men eat without hurry. The peaceful countryside encourages everyone to move a little more slowly. Nearby, Major Meredith stands beside one of the trucks. His notebook rests open in his hands. Over the past several days, he has filled its pages with observations. Not about battles, not about military formations. Instead, the pages contain notes about birds, where they travel, when they rest, how they react to movement, how quickly they scatter, Even experienced soldiers find this rather remarkable. History rarely asks an officer to study the daily habits of emus. Yet here he is, carefully learning from nature itself. Several local farmers arrive just after breakfast. One has ridden over on horseback. Another drives an old truck whose engine can be heard long before it comes into view. They greet one another warmly. The soldiers and farmers have begun working together almost like old friends. Each morning they exchange information. One farmer says quietly, "I counted several hundred near the eastern paddocks yesterday evening." Another nods. They usually move toward the creek after sunrise. A third smiles thoughtfully. They don't seem to like crossing the rocky ridge. Every small detail may prove useful. The soldiers listen carefully. They have learned that local knowledge is worth far more than guesswork. Soon, everyone climbs into the trucks once again. The engines start with familiar rumbles. Dust rises behind the wheel as the convoy slowly heads toward another group of wheat fields. Imagine traveling beside them. The road is little more than 2 narrow tracks across the open countryside. Wildflowers bloom beside the path. Bright yellow blossoms sway gently in the breeze. Tiny blue flowers appear between scattered rocks. Butterflies drift lazily from one flower to another. Even during a military operation, the Australian landscape remains quietly beautiful. The trucks pass several farms. Children wave excitedly from wooden fences. Some have heard about the soldiers from newspaper stories. Others simply enjoy watching the unusual vehicles drive by. The soldiers smile and wave back. The atmosphere remains friendly everywhere they go. Eventually they reach another broad valley. The wheat stretches almost as far as the eye can see. Its gentle green color moves like soft waves whenever the wind passes across it. For a few peaceful moments, everything appears completely still. Then movement catches their attention. Far away, dozens of long necks rise above the wheat. Soon they realize there are not dozens. There are hundreds. The emus are spread across nearly the entire valley. Some feed quietly. Others wander toward small patches of shade. Several young birds stay close beside older adults. The flock appears completely relaxed. Major Meredith studies the scene for several minutes. He notices something interesting. Although the birds seem scattered, they are not moving randomly. Small family groups remain together. Young birds follow older ones. If one group changes direction, nearby groups often do the same a little later. There is no obvious leader. Yet the flock somehow remains connected. Nature has created its own quiet order. The soldiers decide to try a different approach. Rather than moving directly toward the birds, they spread out across a wider area. The idea is simple. Perhaps the flock can be gently encouraged away from the most valuable wheat fields. The plan begins calmly. The soldiers move carefully. Farmers position themselves at different points along nearby fences. Everything seems peaceful. For several minutes, the birds continue feeding without concern. Then one young emu notices movement. Its head lifts. Its large eyes quietly study the distant figures. Another bird notices. Then another. Within moments, the familiar pattern begins once again. The flock starts walking, then running. But something surprises everyone. Instead of rushing in every direction, several smaller groups weave gracefully around one another. One group moves through a gap between 2 hills. Another follows a narrow animal trail. Several others disappear behind patches of thick scrub. Watching them almost resembles watching streams of water flowing around smooth stones. They separate naturally, then continue moving with remarkable confidence. One soldier quietly says, "They always seem to know exactly where they're going." A nearby farmer smiles. "They probably do. Those birds have crossed this country long before any of us arrived." The words linger in everyone's thoughts. It is an important reminder. The farms are relatively new. The migration routes are ancient. For thousands upon thousands of years, emus have crossed these same valleys. Their ancestors walked these paths before fences divided the landscape, before wheat replaced native grasses, before roads connected distant towns. The birds are not invading. They are simply continuing a journey older than memory itself. This realization brings a quiet sense of respect. Even while trying to protect the crops, the soldiers cannot help admiring the remarkable animals before them. As the morning becomes afternoon, the heat slowly increases. The Australian sun shines brightly overhead. Small insects hum among the grasses. Dragonflies dart above nearby ponds. The air becomes wonderfully still. Many of the emus slow their pace during the hottest hours. Some gather beneath scattered eucalyptus trees. Others rest quietly in patches of shade. Their long necks lower slightly. Their feathers stir gently in the warm breeze. The soldiers decide to pause as well. Everyone welcomes a little shade. Water bottles are passed around. Tea is poured into metal cups. One farmer opens a basket filled with fresh bread and homemade biscuits. The food is shared generously. Conversation drifts from farming to family life. One soldier speaks about his home near Melbourne. Another remembers fishing trips from his childhood. A farmer describes how his young daughter enjoys collecting brightly colored feathers that the emus naturally leave behind during molting season. For a while, the unusual operation fades into the background. People simply enjoy one another's company beneath the quiet trees. As the afternoon continues, another farmer rides up with fresh news. There are more birds near the western paddocks. The group thanks him. The soldiers gather their equipment once more. Off they go across another stretch of open country. This pattern repeats itself throughout the day. Every time one flock moves away, another appears somewhere else. The countryside is simply too vast. The birds are too mobile. No sooner does one problem seem solved than another quietly appears beyond the next hill. By late afternoon, Major Meredith begins to recognize something that will later become famous. The challenge is not defeating the emus. The challenge is keeping up with them. The birds do not stand still. They do not remain where people expect them to be. Their greatest strength is simply their ability to keep moving. Steadily, patiently, endlessly. As evening approaches, the golden sunlight returns once again. Long shadows stretch across the fields. The wheat glows softly beneath the lowering sun. The emus gradually wander toward open grasslands beyond the farms. Their silhouettes stand against the warm orange sky. From a distance, they look almost like ancient travelers continuing an endless journey. The soldiers quietly watch them disappear. No one speaks for several moments. There is something strangely peaceful about the sight. One private finally breaks the silence. "I suppose tomorrow they'll come back." A nearby farmer smiles kindly. "Yes, they usually do." There is no bitterness in his voice, only acceptance. Life on the Australian frontier has always required patience. Nature cannot be hurried. Wild animals cannot read fences. The seasons continue whether people wish them to or not. As darkness slowly settles across the countryside, everyone returns once more to their evening routines. The soldiers clean their dusty boots. Farmers enjoy supper with their families. Children ask curious questions about the day's events. The emus rest beneath the stars. High above them all, the night sky stretches endlessly across Australia, calm and unchanged. Tomorrow will bring another sunrise, another quiet search, another chapter in this remarkable story. And in our next chapter, we will gently discover how Major Meredith began changing his plans once again, how the operation entered its most memorable days, and how the calm determination of both people and birds slowly transformed a local farming problem into a legend that would be remembered for generations. As another peaceful night quietly slips away, let us continue our slow walk across the Australian countryside. The moon hangs low above the western hills. Its gentle light fades as the first colors of dawn begin to spread across the eastern sky. The stars disappear one by one. The air is cool and wonderfully fresh. Tiny droplets of dew rest upon the wheat, catching the morning light like countless little diamonds. Everything feels calm. The land seems to wake very slowly. A pair of magpies begins their cheerful morning song. Far away, a flock of galahs flies across the pale blue sky, their soft pink feathers glowing in the early sunlight. The breeze carries the familiar scent of eucalyptus leaves. It is another beautiful Australian morning. Inside the military camp, life begins once more. The soldiers have now settled into a comfortable routine. They know exactly where the cooking pots are stored. They know how quickly the morning mist disappears. They know that the first cup of tea somehow tastes especially good before the day's work begins. One young soldier quietly stirs the fire. Another slices fresh bread. Someone jokes that the emus probably wake earlier than anyone else. A few gentle laughs drift through the camp. The unusual assignment has brought the men closer together. There is very little complaining. Instead, there is curiosity. Every day seems to teach them something new. Major Meredith finishes his breakfast and steps outside. He looks toward the distant hills. His notebook has become thicker. Every page contains careful observations. Some entries describe where the birds crossed fences. Others mention the weather. Some simply record how quickly a flock disappeared once it noticed movement. He has come to respect the countryside. It refuses to behave according to simple plans. The land has its own rhythm. So do the birds. Soon several farmers arrive once again. Their horses move slowly along the dusty road. One farmer removes his hat as he approaches. "Morning, Major." "Morning. I've seen another large flock." "Where this time?" "Near the Western Creek." Major Meredith smiles gently. "It seems they enjoy keeping us busy." The farmer laughs quietly. "They certainly do." The conversation remains friendly. There is no frustration, only a shared determination to protect the coming harvest. The trucks are prepared. Engines begin their familiar rumble. Dust rises behind the convoy as it heads toward the western paddocks. Imagine traveling alongside them. The countryside stretches endlessly in every direction. Golden grasses sway beneath the wind. Wildflowers bloom beside dry creek beds. A lonely windmill turns slowly against the bright blue sky. The land feels enormous. It is easy to understand why finding thousands of moving birds across such vast country is no simple task. After nearly an hour of travel, the convoy reaches another wide valley. The farmers quietly point ahead. There, at first the soldiers see nothing. Then little by little, shapes begin appearing among the wheat. 1, 5, 20. Soon they realize there are hundreds. The flock seems almost endless. The birds are spread across the valley like scattered leaves carried by the wind. Some are feeding. Others are walking peacefully toward a nearby dam. Several younger birds remain close beside older adults. Everything appears perfectly calm. Major Meredith studies the landscape carefully. He has learned something important over the past several days. The birds rarely stay in one place for long. If the soldiers rush forward too quickly, the flock simply disappears. Today he decides to move with even greater patience. The men spread out slowly. No sudden movements. No loud voices. The trucks remain hidden behind a small rise. Everyone waits. Minutes pass. The only sounds are birdsong and the whisper of wind through the wheat. A butterfly drifts lazily across the field. Somewhere nearby, a grasshopper leaps from one stem to another. The waiting itself becomes strangely peaceful. Then, just as the soldiers begin moving again, a curious thing happens. Several emus stop feeding. They lift their heads high. For a long moment, they simply stand still. Their large eyes quietly observe the landscape. No alarm. No excitement. Only careful attention. One soldier whispers, "I think they've seen us." Major Meredith nods. "I believe they have." The remarkable part is that the soldiers cannot immediately tell how the birds notice them. No loud sound has been made. No sudden movement seems obvious. Yet somehow the flock has become aware. The birds remain still for another few seconds. Then, almost gracefully, they begin walking away. Not running. Not yet. Simply walking. Their long legs carry them steadily toward open country. The soldiers continue moving carefully. The distance between them grows smaller. For a moment it appears they may finally guide the flock away from the wheat. Then one younger emu suddenly begins to run. Almost instantly the rest follow. Once again the valley fills with moving birds. Dust rises gently behind hundreds of powerful legs. The flock separates naturally into smaller groups. Some head toward scattered trees. Others disappear over gentle hills. Within only a few minutes, the wide valley seems almost empty again. One private removes his hat and wipes his forehead. They always know. An older farmer standing nearby smiles kindly. "I've lived here nearly 20 years. They've been teaching me the same lesson all that time." The soldiers laugh softly. There is no embarrassment, only admiration. Every day they understand these birds a little better. The emus are not extraordinary because they are trying to outsmart anyone. They are extraordinary because they are perfectly suited to their home. They have sharp eyesight, excellent hearing, powerful legs, and generations of experience traveling this land. Nature has quietly prepared them for exactly this life. As the morning passes into afternoon, the heat becomes stronger. Even the wind seems slower now. The soldiers rest beneath several large gum trees. The shade feels wonderfully cool. One farmer opens a basket containing fresh apples from his small orchard. He offers them to the soldiers. They accept gratefully. Conversation drifts once again toward everyday life. Someone talks about cricket. Another mentions the latest newspaper story describing the operation. One young soldier chuckles. "My mother will probably read that." Another replies with a smile. "I hope mine doesn't." Everyone laughs gently. The peaceful humor helps make the long days easier. Nearby, a small group of emus walks quietly toward a water hole. The soldiers simply watch them. No one rushes forward. For a few moments, both people and birds share the same quiet afternoon without disturbing one another. The scene is almost beautiful. Sunlight reflects from the still water. Dragonflies skim across the surface. The emus lower their heads to drink. A pair of ducks paddles calmly nearby. The countryside feels completely at peace. Major Meredith quietly studies the birds through his binoculars. He notices how carefully they watch one another. If one bird pauses, several others pause too. If one changes direction, nearby birds often follow a short time later. There seems to be no commander, no leader, only shared awareness. It reminds him that nature often solves problems without words. Late in the afternoon, another messenger arrives from a nearby farm. More birds have been seen several miles away. The convoy prepares to move again. Dust rises behind the trucks as they disappear toward the next valley. The pattern continues exactly as before. One flock moves away. Another appears elsewhere. The operation becomes less about chasing birds and more about understanding their endless journey across the landscape. As the sun begins sinking toward the horizon, everything grows quieter. The light becomes softer. The wheat glows with warm shades of gold and amber. The emus slowly wander toward open grasslands beyond the farms. Their long shadows stretch across the earth. One little boy stands beside a fence, watching them disappear into the distance. His father joins him. "They're amazing, aren't they?" The boy nods. "They're very big." His father smiles. "And very old." Old. Their families have walked across this country for thousands of years. The boy watches silently for a while longer. Then he asks, "Will they come back tomorrow?" His father looks toward the fatting shapes on the horizon. "I expect they will." Neither sounds worried, only thoughtful. Nature follows its own quiet calendar. As darkness gently returns, the soldiers make their way back to camp. The farmers return to their homes. The emus settle beneath scattered trees. The same stars begin appearing overhead once more. The Southern Cross shines brightly above the peaceful Australian plains. Around the campfire, Major Meredith closes his notebook for the evening. He has learned something valuable. Not every challenge can be solved quickly. Some require observation, patience, respect for the land itself. And tomorrow, another lesson will surely arrive with the sunrise. As the night grows still, let us leave the camp resting beneath the endless sky. In our next chapter, we will gently explore how the operation slowly drew toward its conclusion, why the government eventually decided to bring it to an end, and how the remarkable story of the Great Emu War quietly became one of Australia's most beloved historical tales. As another quiet evening settles gently across the Australian plains, let us continue our peaceful journey. The last light of the day slowly fades beyond the distant hills. The sky changes from warm gold to soft orange. Then orange becomes gentle pink. Finally, deep shades of blue spread across the heavens as the first stars quietly appear. A cool breeze drifts through the wheat fields. The air carries the familiar scent of dry grass and eucalyptus. The countryside seems to sigh with contentment after another long day beneath the Australian sun. The soldiers have returned to their camp once again. Dust covers their boots. Their trucks wear another thin coat of fine red earth. Their clothes are warm from many hours spent beneath the open sky. Yet no one seems hurried. The pace of life here has become slower. The wide landscape encourages patience. Around a small campfire, water begins to boil for the evening tea. Metal cups are passed from one pair of hands to another. Simple conversation fills the quiet air. One soldier gazes toward the stars. "I never imagined my military service would bring me here." Another smiles. "Neither did I." A third quietly laughs. "But I don't mind." Everyone nods. Although the assignment has been unusual, there is something peaceful about these evenings. far from crowded cities, far from the memories of distant battlefields. Only open skies, gentle winds, and the endless Australian countryside. Major Meredith sits beside the fire with his notebook once again. Many pages are now filled. Some describe the movements of the birds. Others record conversations with local farmers. Several contain observations about the landscape itself. Over these past days, he has come to understand something very important. The emus are not behaving strangely. They are behaving exactly as nature intended. It is the land that has changed. The wheat fields are new. The fences are new. The farms are new. The birds are simply continuing journeys that began long before any of these things existed. That thought stays with him. The following morning begins like many others. The first birds sing before sunrise. The eastern sky slowly brightens. Mist lingers across the valleys. Tea is prepared. Breakfast is eaten. Maps are unfolded. Yet there is a slightly different feeling in the camp. The soldiers have now spent many days following the great flocks. They know the countryside well. The farmers know them by name. Children wave happily whenever the trucks pass. Even the local dogs seem familiar with the daily routine. The operation has become part of everyday life. Still, everyone understands that it cannot continue forever. The army has many responsibilities across Australia. Soldiers cannot remain in the wheat fields indefinitely. Government officials begin receiving new reports. Some explain that the soldiers have worked diligently. Others describe how difficult the enormous landscape has made the task. The birds continue moving. The wheat harvest slowly approaches. Nature refuses to stand still. Officials quietly review everything that has happened. Imagine another meeting in Perth. Papers lie neatly, arranged across polished wooden tables. Maps of Western Australia hang upon the walls. Several officials discuss the latest reports. No one speaks with disappointment. Instead, the conversation is thoughtful. The operation has provided valuable assistance. It has drawn attention to the difficulties faced by the farming communities. It has also revealed just how enormous Australia's countryside truly is. One official quietly remarks, "It seems the birds know the land better than anyone." Several others smile. There is truth in those simple words. Eventually, a decision is reached. The military operation will be brought to a close. The soldiers will soon return to their normal duties. The farmers will continue caring for their land. Other methods of protecting crops will be explored in the future. The decision is practical. No great ceremony marks the occasion. No victory parade. No celebration. Only the quiet ending of an unusual assignment. News reaches the military camp. Major Meredith receives the message calmly. He gathers the soldiers together. The announcement is brief. Our work here is coming to an end. The men nod respectfully. Many had expected this. One young soldier glances across the fields. "I suppose the emus will still be here tomorrow." Major Meredith smiles gently. "Yes, I expect they will." There is no bitterness in his voice. Only quiet acceptance. The soldiers begin preparing for the journey home. Tents are folded carefully. Cooking equipment is packed into wooden crates. Tools are cleaned before being loaded onto the trucks. Everything is done with the same discipline that marked their arrival. Nearby, several farmers come to say goodbye. Hands are shaken warmly. Smiles are exchanged. One farmer thanks the soldiers sincerely. "You did what you could." Major Meredith replies just as warmly. You've taught us a great deal. Another farmer laughs softly. I suppose the emus taught us all something. Everyone smiles. Indeed they have. For a few moments, the conversation turns away from birds entirely. Families are discussed. Children, weather, the coming harvest. Life will continue, just as it always does. The friendship formed during these unusual weeks will remain long after the trucks have departed. The next morning, the convoy begins its journey away from the farming districts. Dust rises gently behind the vehicles. Farmhouses slowly disappear into the distance. Windmills turn steadily beneath the bright blue sky. Several children wave from wooden gates as the trucks pass. The soldiers wave back. The countryside gradually becomes quieter once again. The farmers return to their daily routines. There are fences to mend, fields to inspect, livestock to care for. The work of farming never truly ends. Meanwhile, the emus continue walking. They know nothing about official decisions, nothing about military reports, nothing about newspapers. They simply follow the changing seasons. Some travel toward fresh grass after welcome rains. Others guide their young across familiar paths. Life continues exactly as it always has. Perhaps that is one of the most peaceful lessons this story offers. Nature rarely hurries. It simply continues. The great migration goes on. The birds disappear beyond distant hills. Weeks later, many of the wheat fields become quiet once more. The harvest finally begins. Golden grain fills waiting wagons. The sound of machinery replaces the footsteps of wandering birds. Although some crops have been lost, many fields still produce valuable harvests. Life moves forward. New fences are built. Stronger barriers are considered. Farmers continue adapting, just as they always have. Across Australia, newspapers publish the final reports about the unusual operation. Some articles describe the difficulties. Others focus on the remarkable speed of the birds. Many writers cannot resist smiling at the strange nature of the story. Readers across the country continue discussing it. Some exaggerate the details. Others simplify them. Little by little, the events begin changing from recent news into a memorable tale. Stories have a curious habit of growing with time. People remember the surprising parts. They repeat the amusing moments. Small details become larger with every retelling. Soon the Great Emu War is spoken of not simply as a farming problem, but as one of Australia's most unusual historical stories. Yet beneath the humor lies something gentle. It is a story about people trying to build new lives after hardship. It is a story about nature following ancient rhythms. It is a reminder that the land itself often has plans of its own. As the stars slowly return above the quiet Australian countryside, let us leave the wheat fields resting peacefully beneath the night sky. The soldiers have gone home. The farmers continue their patient work. And somewhere beyond the horizon, beneath the same moonlight, the emus quietly continue their endless journey across the ancient land they have always known. In our next and final chapter, we will gently reflect on why the Great Emu War has remained famous for nearly a century, what really happened beyond the popular jokes, and why this calm, curious story still brings quiet smiles to people around the world before we end our journey with a peaceful good night. As our gentle journey through history begins to draw toward its quiet end, let us slow our pace even more. The Australian countryside rests peacefully beneath another clear night. The wheat fields shimmer softly beneath the moonlight. The wind moves gently through the tall grass, making a quiet whisper that seems almost like a lullaby. Far away, somewhere beyond the hills, an emu walks steadily beneath the stars. It has no idea that nearly 100 years later, people around the world will still tell stories about its remarkable ancestors. History is full of great kings, great queens, famous explorers, powerful armies, important discoveries. Yet sometimes, the stories that remain in our hearts are not the biggest ones. Sometimes they are the quietest. Sometimes they are the most unexpected. The Great Emu War is one of those stories. It has survived because it reminds us that history is not always serious. Not every chapter of the past is filled with grand victories or dramatic defeats. Sometimes history simply smiles. When people first hear the words Great Emu War, they often imagine something extraordinary. Perhaps they picture soldiers marching in long lines across the desert. Perhaps they imagine thousands of giant birds charging across the landscape. Reality was much quieter, much slower, much more human. A group of hardworking farming families needed help protecting their crops. A small number of soldiers answered that call. The birds continued following ancient migration routes that had existed for thousands of years. The people adapted. The birds adapted. Life moved forward. Over the decades, newspapers, books, teachers, and storytellers repeated the tale. Each generation added its own little smile. Children laughed when they imagined giant birds quietly confusing trained soldiers. Travelers visiting Australia often asked about the famous emus. Writers included the story in collections of unusual historical events. Before long, people far beyond Australia had heard about it. Today, if someone searches for unusual moments in history, the Great Emu War almost always appears. Yet behind every humorous version lies the quieter truth we have explored together tonight. The farmers were real people. Many had returned from the hardships of the First World War. They had accepted difficult land. They worked from sunrise until sunset. They hoped for peaceful lives. Every field of wheat represented months of effort. Every successful harvest meant another year of security for their families. Their concerns were genuine. The soldiers were also real people. Major Meredith and his small group approached the assignment with professionalism. They did not treat it as a joke. They carefully observed the countryside. They listened respectfully to local farmers. They adapted their plans whenever necessary. Even when success proved difficult, they continued their work with patience. And then there were the emus, perhaps the most remarkable characters of all. They never understood that history was being written around them. They knew nothing of governments, nothing of newspapers, nothing of military planning. They simply searched for food, walked toward water, protected their young, followed the same ancient paths their ancestors had walked for countless generations. In many ways, they remind us that nature has its own quiet wisdom. The world changes. Cities grow. Roads appear. Fields replace forests. Yet many animals continue living, according to rhythms far older than human history. There is something peaceful about that thought. The Great Emu War also teaches another gentle lesson. People often imagine that humans control everything around them. But nature has a way of reminding us that the world is shared. The farmers worked with determination. The soldiers worked with discipline. The emus followed instinct. None of them acted with cruelty. None wished unnecessary harm. They simply had different needs. The meeting between those needs created one of history's most memorable stories. Over time, Australian farmers continued improving their methods. Stronger fences were built in many places. New ways of protecting crops were developed. Communities shared ideas with one another. Agriculture slowly changed as technology improved. Life became a little easier with each passing generation. The emus remained. They still wander across much of Australia today. Travelers are often delighted to see them. Some watch them crossing open grasslands. Others spot them beside quiet country roads. Many visitors are surprised by how graceful they appear. Their long legs carry them effortlessly across the landscape. Their curious eyes quietly observe everything around them. They remain one of Australia's most beloved native animals. Imagine visiting the Australian countryside today. The roads are smoother now. Modern vehicles replace many of the old trucks. Harvesting machines have become larger and more efficient. Many farms use technology that the farmers of the 1930s could hardly have imagined. Yet the landscape still feels wonderfully familiar. The same wide skis stretch overhead. The same eucalyptus trees sway in the wind. The same warm sunlight covers the wheat fields. And somewhere nearby, an emu quietly walks through the grass. History leaves gentle footprints upon the land. Some are easy to see. Others fade slowly into memory. The Great Emu War has left no grand monuments, no enormous statues, no towering castles. Instead, it has left something much softer. A story, a smile, a reminder that even the most unusual events can teach us kindness, patience, and respect for the natural world. As the years passed, Major Meredith returned to the ordinary duties of military life. The farmers continued planting wheat. Children grew into adults. Families expanded. The countryside changed little by little. The emus continued their endless migrations. Generation after generation crossed the same valleys, climbed the same hills, and searched for the same water holes. The seasons came and went. Rain fell. Grass grew. The wheat turned gold every harvest. Life continued. Perhaps that is the most comforting ending of all. Not every story must end with a great victory. Sometimes the happiest ending is simply that life goes on. The land heals. People adapt. Nature continues. The stars still shine above the Australian plains, exactly as they did a century ago. If you were standing there tonight, far away from city lights, you would see the Southern Cross sparkling overhead. You might hear the gentle rustle of wheat moving in the breeze. Perhaps somewhere in the darkness, you would hear the soft, low call of an emu drifting across the quiet countryside. It would sound exactly as it has for thousands of years. Imagine yourself taking one last slow walk across those peaceful fields. The air is cool now. The moon lights your path. The windmill turns slowly in the distance. A farmhouse glows warmly with a single lamp in the window. Inside, a family rests peacefully after another day of honest work. Beyond the fence, several emus move quietly beneath the stars. Neither people nor birds disturb one another. There is only silence, only calm, only the endless Australian night. And now our own gentle journey through history has reached its resting place. Thank you for spending this quiet time exploring one of the world's most unusual historical stories with me. If you found this peaceful walk through history relaxing, I hope you'll join me again for another gentle adventure into the past. Until then, may your evening be calm. May your thoughts grow quiet. May your dreams be peaceful. Close your eyes. Take one slow, comfortable breath. Let the worries of the day drift away like the warm wind crossing the Australian plains. The wheat fields rest beneath the stars. The emus continue their ancient journey. The night is peaceful. And now, it is time to sleep.